Well, as we kick off the new week, we have chances for severe weather early in the week across parts of the Corn Belt and the upper Midwest. We saw some severe weather in the upper Midwest, the northern plains over the weekend. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the heat and humidity that continues to plague a lot of the country as well, and take a look at the weather forecast for the week ahead. Joining us now, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. And Eric, thanks for being with us here today. So let's set this up. I mentioned we did see some severe weather over the weekend. We have more chances Monday and early in the week. What is kind of the latest outlook you're seeing in terms of severe weather right now?
Yeah, so the weekend severe storms, which if you just look back at the storm reports, they just line up northwest to southeast. And all of that has been coming around this massive ridge that's in the western United States. And that's key to think about here. Now, one thing I want to point out, if we go back 2 weeks ago and look at the week 2 forecast, which just verified this weekend, much of the Canadian prairie into the northern plains and Midwest were forecast drier. And this just shows you the impact of the local moisture source and what happens when you keep the heat way west, which is what we did for most of last weekend to this weekend. So the storms run around the ridge, they form, they can produce massive hail, straight line wind damage. And again, today we're going to be watching this corridor that's kind of like the storms in Minnesota this morning, evolving later on today to being a Wisconsin, a northern Illinois, in northern Indiana, Iowa risk. And the risk is going to be for damaging winds again. And this is the wrong time of year to have that. Those strong straight line winds can really be problematic. So as it stands this morning, we have yet to see the storms develop, but it's one of those situations where I think we could really get some pretty nasty weather across a big section of the Corn Belt tonight. So it'll be important to see tomorrow morning what the damage look like from the storms if they do come through as forecast. Now, what's nice is after this, all the heat goes back west again, and a big front comes through, clears things out, drops the humidity, drops the temperatures, and it's going to be beautiful. And what's funny is, Jesse, I will be leaving Illinois when the nice weather comes in. I'm going to go first to Fargo, then I'm going to go to Florida, where it's going to be really, really hot down there for a conference. So yeah, I'm going to be really avoiding what's going to be beautiful weather in my backyard here. But let's just put a pin into it up to where we are this year. We have had for most of the Corn Belt timely weather that's been on the favorable side of things. Now, I'm not going to ignore the fact that it was incredibly wet in April, May, and June for big sections of the Northwest Corn Belt, but Barrel's rains coming through delivered perfectly timed rains for the Eastern Corn Belt. And now the backing off of this excessive heat, which don't get me wrong, it's going to be stupid hot in the midsection. I don't know if that's an official meteorology phrase, but it's going to be hot and humid and gross. But we bring in the timely front and things back off. And to be honest, this evolving weather story is what I think is preventing, combined with other factors, any sort of good news in the markets, which is beyond frustrating with all of this. So yeah, that's what I see in the near term.
Yeah, very frustrating for producers in terms of the market action, no doubt. And all that heat and humidity, too, we've seen up and down the West Coast and stretching through the South and into the Southeast, and drought growing in portions of the Southeast. I mean, it's been a prolonged, excessive heat event here, Eric. It just feels like every single day I take a look at the all hazards weather map, and it's full of pink and orange heat warnings and watches. It feels like it's been going on forever, Eric.
Well, it's maybe the one thing we got right about the forecast, right? I mean, we've been talking, you and I've been talking for years, but since this beginning of this year, we're like, hey, I think hot, stormy summer. And most of that's verified. And we knew that because of that, there'd be places that were hit. So one of the areas you just kind of mentioned that I'm concerned about is if you just stretch from like parts of the Delta through parts of the Mid-South, like also the northern part of the Southeast, getting up to the Appalachian Mountains. That's been an area that's been missed. But here's the good news. After this front clears, I'm talking about clearing the Midwest, we don't reposition the Bermuda High, which means flow is going to come around the Bermuda High, run into that front, and rain across some extremely dry acres. And that's going to be critical. I got several emails last week from folks that are farming in the Mid-South, the Delta, getting into northern Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. And like, Eric, I manage 55,000 acres. If we don't get this rain in the next 7 days, we're going to be talking about significant yield loss. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I think it's going to rain. They're like, when? 7 days from now. And that's extremely frustrating for a manager, for a producer, but it's at least the best chance that I've seen. Now, here's the long and short of it. I wouldn't say this if I was talking to a big group in the West, But the more we keep the heat in the West, since most of the folks listening to us today are in the Midwest or in the Mid-South, okay, the more the heat stays in the West, the better the chances are more and more storms coming through. But the Western United States, extremely hot, very smoky, Four Corners Ridge riding storms. I think you're going to hear me say that on repeat all the way through August.
Well, I know as well, we got to watch the tropics after all of the talk and all the damage done from Hurricane Beryl here. Tropics feel like they're getting a little quiet again. Talk about that, Eric.
Yeah, so the reason the tropics quieting down, two things. First of all, there is a tremendous amount of dust coming off the Sahara right now. I saw one report that suggested that right now 2024 is the dustiest that the North Atlantic, right there where we make hurricanes, has been since they've been keeping records. But whenever you see a lot of dust coming off the Sahara, that's actually an indication of active tropical thunderstorms leaving the Sahel, which is south of the Sahara. And so in the near term, there's dust. The second reason is we've got some suppression in the atmosphere over that area. It's all a part of the MJO. It's a part of the movement of the, across the tropics of where there's either favorable or not favorable, conditions for getting air to rise and sink. But the reality of it is that we don't look at July as being our big hurricane. It's August, September, October, and there's a lot of lead indicators that we are going to be getting it back into an active hurricane season. So to be honest, Jesse, I could give you a forecast for August, September, and October, and I think it's going to be largely dominated by a Western U.S. ridge event. But the massive wild card is tropics. We will likely be getting big tropical features that come through the Gulf of Mexico, which has already recovered its heat after Beryl stole some of it. And therefore, if we keep the Bermuda high over Bermuda, we pump the storm systems to the south of it. This is going to be a year where tropical systems are going to be critical. And to be honest, if we can get them in August and early September, fine. We don't want them late September into October when they could really be disruptive for harvest or have a major impact on the cotton crop, which is, open bowl at that point, and you put heavy rain on it, we've got problems. So that's all in one breath, Jesse. These are just the things we're watching right now, and it's going to continue to be that way as we go through this summer time period.
Well, as we wrap it up here today, Eric, final thoughts, anything else you're watching here, maybe a little bit longer range or global weather things you're keeping an eye on as well? Any final thoughts for us this week?
Yeah, we got the Olympics coming up, right? So the North Atlantic's going to be important. We want to see if the jet stream's going to keep Central Europe over toward France hotter than average. That can have a huge impact on the Olympic Games. I mean, normally in France, you got to understand, a lot of folks there don't have air conditioning because of the Mediterranean climate. It's set up to where excessive heat is not necessarily a long duration problem. And then you go west of there, let me rephrase that, east of there over toward Western Russia. And the forecast continues to be hot and dry in that area, which has got to start to make some sort of a splash at some point. But in terms of the bigger picture, La Nina is waiting in the wings. There's cold water that's there. As soon as the trade winds get going, we'll see that surface, and it could be an important player for this fall and winter. And might as well, since it's the heart of summer, just tell you, if La Nina is a big factor for winter, the Northwest gets very, very snowy and it gets very, very cold. We'll have an active Ohio River Valley storm track, which means for you and I, a lot of ice this winter and repeated shots at some cold air at times, unlike last winter. And the whole South tends to get drier from California all the way to South Carolina. So that's if La Nina is the dominant player. And we had a model last week show up and say that that was going to be the case. So that's what it is with meteorology. We're always like, well, what's next? What's next? What's next? And maybe that's how we distract all of you from how terrible we are at times at forecasting the now. So I don't want to be full confession there, but maybe that's the problem.
Well, I'd say you do a pretty good job for the here and now and the long range. And folks can stay up to date as well with a lot of great weather information online. agweather.com. That's ag-wx.com. With that, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Thanks so much, Eric. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. See you, Jesse.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.